This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest.
Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
A save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Ruidíaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Niko Moreno leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region!
Seattle Sounders is campeón!
It's gone! It's gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
We want to win. It's Seattle Sounders, bro.
Porque says cheated.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder Hart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Open Cup seriously.
Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes. Today is Wednesday. We are match day -3, I guess, for the Sounders coming up for their Western Conference semifinal against LAFC. I am at Long Acres in Renton with Niko Moreno, friend of the show. This is the second time we've done this show on site here in Renton. How you doing, Niko?
I'm doing great, man. We're, using the facility so they continue to keep us here.
Exactly.
I've been.
We should have got drinks.
We should have
got coffee.
drinks.
We could have had a whole thing today.
We should have. We absolutely should have. I've been thinking about it. Getting some water, some soda, some coffee out here, get it all ready to go for us to just dominate this space. But man, I'm excited, man. It's playoffs in MLS. There's some crazy news going on around MLS. It's a good time to follow this league, in my opinion. It's getting more, not just globalized, but it's just an exciting time in MLS. I don't know why. I'm more excited right now than I've been in a very long time when it comes to MLS.
The only shame, we will talk about the game, but I will say the frustration that I have, again, I'm reminded this time every year, this break between the international break falls at the worst time for the MLS season, for the MLS playoffs, because luckily, I think the league is doing a better job of bridging the gap between the end of the first round and the start of the semifinals, because there's been a steady stream of news. That we had some announcements today. Or I guess yesterday was the coach of the year. Was it yesterday? No, it was today.
It was today.
Today was the coach of the year announcement. Wilfred Nancy, somewhat of an upset, I thought, over Tata Martino.
Yes.
But then a day earlier, Tata Martino announced that he's leaving Miami for quote unquote personal reasons. I don't know. I promise we will get into LAFC Sounders, but I feel like this is a good transition to talk about this situation. Do you know anything about what's going on in Miami?
Nothing that I can share necessarily on the mics. What I do think when it comes to a project that was based around a group of individuals, one who Tata is a key component, there is no way that I can believe that there was a personal reason big enough for Tata to just abandon ship in a project like this one when he
just a year in, basically.
Just a year in, when he has been so involved. He's done so much to get the team where they've gotten, where he's built these relationships with academy players. He has a relationship with all of the veterans and Messi and friend types. So all I will say is that there had to be more. Tata Martino is a strong personality type that does not take any S from anybody. The Mas brothers and that ownership group also is very in your face. I've called them the Jerry Jones of MLS. They are very big when it comes to their personality and the way they handle things. So if I had to guess, and if I was a betting man, I would say that there was an issue beyond control and Tata decided to jump ship.
And so what kind of ramifications did this have for the project, for lack of a better term? Because it wasn't entirely predicated around Tata Martino, but he was, like you said, a central figure. They already had Messi, so I don't know if it means that Messi is leaving, but they're probably going to have to bring in a coach who Messi approves.
100%.
They're going to have, and that you would think that there are other players on the roster who were here. Again, Messi is a huge part of it, but so was Martino.
100%. And look, I know this is probably the wrong platform, but I do know that Sounder fans are probably very happy about any type of turmoil with the Messi project. So I will go ahead and say that, it creates an incredibly uncontrollable almost problem that has to be nipped in the bud immediately, because job number one is keeping Messi happy.
Right.
You know he's going to have to be around. And Messi's going to want a guy that he can deal with. I think a Xavi type situation is possible. I think maybe, I don't know, even Higuain, bring him up. I mean, I don't know, but it just creates a huge problem. Yeah, I believe he's with the second team. So maybe you can do that. But whatever it is, it's not going to be packaged in such a way, in such a manner that it had been, because with Tata you have certain credibility. With Tata you have the strategic component, the recruiting component.
It was kind of the perfect hire, really.
It was the perfect hire. All of these guys that were brought in, yes, of course, Chris Henderson and that team of scouting has a lot to do with it, but it's very easy for Tata to pick up the phone and say, hey man, come play for me, rather than any other coach in the league. So now you got to figure out what's that balance. And I don't know if there's a big enough name that's willing to come to MLS, that's willing to, that has a good relationship with Messi and friends, that could work. So I think it puts a huge dent in this project, and he starts to lose some credibility.
Well, and it's not necessarily directly related to the Sounders, but there is sort of a Sounders component to this whole thing, and that's Chris Henderson, who has, my understanding, never signed like a full-blown contract extension after his contract expired last year. So he's sort of, I mean, he's getting paid, obviously. I'm sure he's very well compensated, but he is in a situation where he can leave, as far as I understand it. He's been very heavily tied to the Atlanta United job, which is a whole other situation. What do you imagine? Where do you see this going with Chris Henderson?
Look, and I'll go ahead and say this. I've talked to people, and I do know that maybe it's not 50-50 that Chris leaves, but it's definitely not something that would surprise anyone in that organization. There is a desire to keep him, without a doubt, according to people who I've talked to. But they understand that Atlanta can provide the economic part. It provides more of a front man look to the project, because I think I've said it in our last show that I was with you on here, that Chris just hasn't been the face of that project. Is Beckham, is the Mas brothers. He's always kind of in the back end. What you just said about his contract, he's always kept kind of under the table type situation. And as me and you both know and respect a guy like Chris, and know that a lot of the right moves that were made ever since he got into that club are Chris type of moves. Guys that the Sounders were looking at.
That roster was a mess when he took over.
It was a mess.
It's easy to forget now, but that they were under. They had just gotten docked a bunch of allocation money. They had, I mean, the roster situation could barely have been worse than what Chris Henderson inherited, and that he was immediately able to get them to be competitive and really create a foundation where then when Messi showed up, they could build off of it.
100%. So Chris proved that he was worth the money, that he was the guy that we all knew he was here in the Pacific Northwest in another project. Would I wish and hope that he would come back to the Sounders? Absolutely. But that's not going to happen, because the money's elsewhere, and I think he's outgrown what he could do here. So the perfect place is Atlanta. The perfect place is, I mean, it's the easiest move he can make. So I to your question, I think Chris does end up leaving. I think this Tata Martino thing complicates that project even more, because again, the people that you're going to hire for the job are going to be very limited because you do have to consult Messi, because that's just the way of the world. That's the way sports is, man. So, someone told me this is kind of like the LeBron situation, right? I mean, you just got to accommodate yourself to certain people, and that's what's going to happen in Miami. And I don't think Chris wants to deal with it.
Yeah.
And this is just me giving an opinion. I'm not saying Chris told me that. I'm just saying, knowing the person he is and the professional he is, I don't think he want to deal with it.
It's always seemed like a somewhat odd fit for him in that whole environment.
Mm-hmm.
Other than they had a bunch of money and they had high aspirations, and he is very good at what he does, and in that way, it made sense.
And they needed a guy that understood the league,
right,
that had the knowledge of players within the league, that was well networked,
and the kind of player that would come to MLS as well.
100%. So he was the right hire for that. But absolutely, you're right in the fact that he seemed like an odd duck to everything around that. For lack of a better word, I'm going to call it a circus at times.
It is kind of a circus.
If you saw that when they won the Shield, it was a circus, man. It was a circus. The way they framed it, and the Moss brothers all over talking to camera people, like, come on, man. It's a little bit circus.
This is a digression, but I don't think I've ever seen a team celebrate winning the Shield the way that Miami. I mean, to credit to them, they turned it into an event, but it was almost as if they wanted to make sure they had some trophy to celebrate. And that if that was it, I mean, like when it's a pretty stark contrast to the Shield the Sounders won in 2014, where they didn't even do like celebratory drinks in the locker room. I remember Marco Papa being sort of like, "Oh, we're really not gonna do anything."
Marco would ask that question. so yeah, no, and that's exactly it. So I just feel like regardless of Chris Henderson is gonna be the one that dictates what happens next. If they want to keep him, I think he's going to ask for a little more respect to my name type of situation. So, yeah. But if not, man, I think Atlanta has a really good built. You have Gard Lagerwey having Starksy and Hutch together in MLS again. Wonderful. They have a big wallet. Arthur Blank is a guy that's willing to put in some money, so why not?
Anyone else that you're hearing that might be up for that Atlanta job that, I don't know, maybe has some Sounders ties?
Yes, that question has been asked a couple of times in Soccer Down Here's a show I do on Thursdays, and yes, I think that Craig, it would be naive of anyone to not think that Craig Waibel is a candidate for that job.
You're saying it would be naive not to assume he's a candidate.
Not to assume.
Right.
That's what I mean.
Okay.
So it'd be naive not to assume that Craig Waibel is and would be a candidate for that job. Obviously, in a perfect world, Chris Henderson is your guy. But if not, I think Craig Waibel is a guy that, and maybe some of our fan base here, your fan base here, would be excited to hear that Craig is ours. All right.
All right. We can say that, Nico.
That Craig would be gone. But at the same time, I think that it is a possibility.
And in our prep for this, I'll just say one of the names you floated as a potential replacement, I think, which is just speculation, really. Yes. But you mentioned the possibility of Wade Weber as a replacement if Craig were to leave. I was fascinated. I had not really given that any consideration, but it makes a lot of sense on paper that you would bring in a guy like Wade Weber, who is very knowledgeable. He understands the league as well as anyone. He understands the Sounders, more importantly, as well as anyone. He has relationships. He has been doing a lot of the groundwork that it would take to hit the ground running when it comes to a job like this.
Yeah, and look, again, this is not me and Jeremiah sitting here hashtagging Craig out. Let's make that very clear, because I can see where that might be misinterpreted. This is not it. This is just what I've been asking Jeremiah and I to do sometimes is we'll just talk. And I was like, man, if we would have put a mic, this would have been a good conversation. So I appreciate Jeremiah just allowing us to just rant. And I think this is things that you guys want to hear as an audience. But yes, if there was in a scenario where Craig needed to go, I think that Chris Webber's a guy that Wade Weber. I'm sorry, Chris Webber. That's a Sacramento guy. Whoops. Wade Weber is a guy that would be a fit for what the Sounders are looking for in terms of their culture, the ideology. And I believe I just happen to think that the last time we talked to Wade Weber about Jackson Reagan, and we got to ask him a whole bunch of questions about the growth of the league and is it sustainable for this team to do certain things that they're doing now with all of the Seattle and Washington talent being such a big part of the roster. And I thought his answers were on point.
Yeah,
and he understands exactly what the club would need to do. So because of that, I was like, man, he sounds like a GM.
Yeah, and it does dovetail nicely, especially with the way that the Sounders have where they are right now. I've just been doing a lot of research on a story that I hope to write before this weekend, but has been ruminating in my head for a while about the contributions that the Sounders have gotten from players they developed. And especially if you include players they drafted, as well as players that came from Defiance and players that came from the academy, something like 65% of their minutes and 60% of their goals and 55% of their assists have come from players that they developed themselves. Mm-hmm. And if you are going down that path, Wade Weber makes a lot of sense to sort of lean into that. I do think they need to do a better job of diversifying that. I think that's something that's going to hopefully happen this offseason, where they bring in some more talent from outside the organization. But it does create a really strong foundation that you can build off of. And it's pretty remarkable that they're sitting here in the conference semifinals with this kind of internal production. I did run the numbers on everyone else that's still alive. And I think the Red Bulls were the highest at something like 25% of their minutes. And no one, I don't think, is even at 20% of their goals or assists coming from internal players. So it's a pretty remarkable story that we haven't really dug into much. And the Sounders don't get a lot of credit for the developmental work that they do.
100%. And the way, like you said, everything seemed to work in order to keep the roster successful no matter what was going on.
Right.
And that goes, even beyond Craig. And that's why, I've been critical of this season. I've been critical of Brian and at times of Craig, but it's hard to continue to be
too critical when they're getting the results that they're getting.
That's exactly.
I think even internally they'll tell you, we think we could do more to bring players in. We think we would everyone would like to have more budget to bring in players. But at the same time, it is tough to be too critical when the results keep going the way they did. I mean, they finished with 57 points. That's a really good point total.
Yeah.
They're sitting here in the conference semifinals. Now, this is maybe a good transition into talking about these conference semifinals. They are the underdog. Let's not beat around the bush. LAFC is the favorite in this one. They are the host. They have absolutely dominated the Sounders in their 4 previous meetings this year. I really think only the last 3 of them are relevant to understanding this game. But in those 3 games, the LAFC has a 7-0 scoring advantage. They haven't been. I mean, I guess you could say the Open Cup game was close and it was competitive, but really the Sounders have not looked good offensively at all. What do you think they need to do to sort of turn things around offensively?
Man, it's a big question for me, and I'll start by saying a little bit about this specific game. I mean, Seattle. I think has been on this quest to prove that they are still an elite team in the West and that they continue to be a team worthy of that throne that the LAFC club is currently sitting on. That I think is fitting that they're facing them right now and that they're going to need to get through it. What needs to change is a question that is very complex to me because I respect the fact and I understand, I am aware that I am not a head coach and that maybe I'll say things because I have a certain understanding of the game. I do like to counsel a lot of real coaches about situations such as this one. But I spoke specifically to a coach that is a former Western Conference coach in MLS. And my idea for facing a team a 5th time was to change things up, change the formation, change the concepts, change the look of the field. Even if it doesn't work, just for the sake of changing things, that's what I would do. This specific coach told me, look, 2 out of 10 coaches would do that because 8 coaches are going to go with what they've been doing all season long. They're going to die on their concepts. They're going to die on that hill with what they believe was right, whether it worked or not. That's just the way I thought this team should have been set up. But to me, and to your question, just to answer that, as always, super long-winded answer, I would change the formation. I would give them a specific look where Jordan Morris has been ineffective, and that's to say the least, against this LAFC team. 9-1, they've outscored you all season. They've not allowed Jordan to do absolutely anything. Why not Raúl up top? And I know that I'm going to get killed on social media for this, but why not? Why not just do it to see how different, what kind of lanes he opens for Jordan, taking that pressure off of Jordan, taking that necessity to do the dirty work, to press, to move, to come inside, to try to link up, opens up Jordan Morris, who right now could be your biggest threat on the offensive end. Whether he has not found the back of the net is another thing, but I feel like he makes the right movements to get in front of goal. So why not up that by making Raúl, for lack of a better word, this decoy that's going to hold up Chanot, that's going to hold up Murillo, that's going to ask for so much respect, because there is a certain respect for Raúl Ruidíaz. Whether he's older, whether he's not the Raúl of old, there is a certain respect to his name, and I think that would open up some lanes. So the way I would set it up is with Raúl up top, with Jordan on that left side, and we'll talk about the lineup a little bit later, but to me, giving them a different look, maybe they are so good playing against the ball, maybe you concede the ball a little bit. Maybe you play the counters. Maybe you try to explode those moments where Murillo likes to come up with the ball as a center back. So that's what I think should happen, is giving LAFC something completely different to look at than what you'd fail at the last 4 times.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounderatheart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
And it is they did sort of try a 4-4-2 in the first game that they played this year, but notably no Rusnak.
Right.
And so now you would have him. I don't know if they're going to go to a formation change necessarily, but they might be forced into a personnel change. It's been, Paul Rothrock has not been fully in training. I think going maybe all the way back to the Rapids game where he looked really, really good. I think he's been, my memory is correct, I think he's been somewhat limited in training almost ever since then. But for sure, he's been very limited in training ever since the playoffs started. And now we are Wednesday. He wasn't outside training today, or he was outside, but he wasn't training with the ball. Unless he comes out tomorrow and is all in, I think we have to assume he's not going to start. And that creates an opening to do something. Maybe it's moving Christian up to right mid. Maybe it's moving, maybe it's starting Georgie Monongu. There's a lot of options. But one of those options, in your mind, clearly should be...
In my mind.
Yeah, should clearly be starting Raúl.
Yeah, and leaving Jordan on that left wing. He'll use that pocket to come inside. If you look at the Vancouver game, Fafa Picault gave this LAFC team so much problems working his way outside in and shooting the ball from that side that I feel like it's worth looking at. Brian White is very different than Raúl Ruidíaz, but he has that savviness. He has a way about some of his movements inside the 18 that could be similar to Raúl. So why not use that? Why not expose it? Why not try to get Jordan inside in those inside channels? So I think it's worth a try. But to the reality, coming back to the real world and away from Nico's head, Brian's probably not going to do that. And I think that if there's a guy that I feel like it's barking at starting this game by proving himself throughout the week is João Paulo. I feel like João Paulo has looked sharp.
He has looked very
all
sharp
week long.
Yeah, I would
on
agree
the
with that.
ball, shooting. He had a couple of bangers in scrimmages, or at least in the short-sided games that they play. Today he had a couple of great looks on goal. I feel like he's sharp. So if Paul cannot go, and I really don't know if he will.
I don't know. We don't know anything about it. I mean,
we don't know anything.
You know, the last time we talked to Brian, which was Tuesday, so I guess yesterday, he made it sound like, oh, no, Paul is fine. The fact that he wasn't training today suggests that it's not that simple.
No, it's telling. I mean, he literally just walked around the outside of practice today doing nothing else. So to me, that's something to monitor, as I put on Twitter. When he comes to that side, I feel like you almost have to start Christian Roldan on that side for two reasons. One, he's done it. You trust his IQ. You stored his ability. You trust his ability to hit the right spaces, to understand the right triggers defensively. But when it comes to Denis Bouanga, who else would you want pressing, pushing, holding on a guy like Christian that has a V8 engine in this, Honda Civic frame, and he's going to be behind them all time. So I think that you almost have to do that. And then you start JP and Obed at center midfield, and you look pretty good if you ask me.
Well, and you also have the added maybe motivation is the right word of, JP is very much like, as much as Raúl is sort of in I think we have, everyone seems to have accepted that he's probably not coming back this year. I don't know if the door is literally 100% shut, but there's no indications that either side is super interested in having him back. JP, on the other hand, he's also entering free agency. He is probably it's a little easier to figure out a way to get him in financially. It seems like he wants to come back. There was you've done some reporting that we saw. I think he maybe even gave an interview in Portuguese with a Brazilian whatever. He gave an interview where he sort of has made it sound like he hasn't been in contact. What do you know about that situation and maybe the undercurrent of what that means for the rest of the season?
Yeah, so a couple of months ago, maybe even beyond that, maybe 3 months ago, he said that there had been conversations with Craig Weibel and the front office. But as I've asked some sources around recently, there's been nothing but radio silence with JP, and it was a little confusing to me because I had the understanding that the Sounders do want him back and that they want him back as a player because of what he's been able to do. And there was even some thoughts that maybe in the future he could be a coach, that he could follow that trend of the Andy Roses, the Gonzalo Pineda.
I mean, he seems like he's well cut out for that.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, he has that look. He has that look. It's very similar to Gonzalo Pineda. When I talk to him, I get that.
Bilingual or trilingual, I suppose, in his case. He's on paper, you could easily see him being a coach within a year or two of him retiring.
Yeah, but radio silence is never a good way to keep a player.
No, it's not.
It's never. And we've seen that with Niko, and we don't need to go into any of that right now, but there's if you could look at 1,000 cases that are similar, that when you are quiet and you don't at least pull the trigger to tell a player, yes, you're coming back, no, you're not coming back, or hey, we're working on getting you back, it creates some animosity, and he just kind of doesn't go the way you want it. So I think he's motivated. I think I see a motivated player out there. He looks really good.
He looks much like the thing that's been tough about JP this year is that even when he's healthy, he doesn't look like he seems like he's struggling to get through it. He didn't. I thought he looked okay in the second leg against Houston, but he wasn't sharp. But at training this week, he looks like old JP.
Yeah.
He had a goal today where he did this spin, like kind of backheeled spin move off of a cross that was about as slick of a finish as we've seen from anyone, let alone from JP. I mean, but it just sort of seemed to tell something about his confidence, about feeling confident in his body that he can hold up. And, those are a good sign because he is a player who I think can raise the Sounders level when he's at his best.
100%. And look, he's been working on the lateral movements and all of these things that you could see at times. You're like, oh, JP looks a little flat-footed. He's been working on that because I think he sees in LAFC an opportunity to say, I'm still here.
Right.
And that's the type of guy I want on the field. That's the type of guy that I want going against either O'Brien or Tillman or Ilie, whatever formation in that midfield that you see from LAFC. I want that guy, not to mention the fact that his distribution and his ability to find players is better than Christian. Christian is right now, he's looked so good defensively, covering space, doing all these other things. But if there's one thing that he hasn't been really good at, it's been finding players to get services to, whether it's Jordan, whether it's a White. He just hasn't looked as sharp, where I think that a guy like JP can really do that. And maybe he finds a Christian Roldan on the wing. And maybe that just changes things a little bit. So I feel like between his veteran ability, his leadership, his physicality, and his ability to pass the ball and distribute it better, to me, he's a candidate to start this game.
The other player who I think has the potential to raise the Sounders' ceiling is Pedro de la Vega, a player who we have been waiting all season. And I think he had a pretty mixed bag of performance against Houston. The first leg, he did not look good. In the second leg, I actually thought he looked more like himself. We talked to him today after training. You, I think, understood. You got a little bit more out of it than I did because it was in Spanish. What were your takeaways from that interview?
I see a guy that's finally feeling like himself on and off the field. He's a guy that still understands and knows that what he believes his potential is still some play away, some rhythm away. He mentioned, and I quote, I can still give more, but I feel in better rhythm. And I asked him about where he's grown defensively, offensively. He mentioned, I'm always growing, I'm always learning. But although he did not say specifically what I kind of wanted him to say, because I see it, is the defensive component. His repress, his ability to, if not get the ball back, kind of push that player, force him onto the next guy pressing. I think he's doing that a lot better. And that has to do with the understanding, the game rhythm, and the game time. He mentioned, look, the fact that I was able to finish, and he said this in Spanish, I was almost a whole game. And yeah, maybe I got pulled off the last 8 minutes if you count extra time, but I need that. That's what I've been used to. That's what I was used to last year in my other team. And getting those full time, that full minutes, that's giving me confidence, and you could see it on his play.
Yeah, he looked, that was the most encouraging thing I thought from the second leg, was just the raw number of minutes. And he has been sort of ramping up. Like he had been pushing, into the 70s, but this was an 88, 89 minute performance, something like that. And the thing I like about him is that, no, he's not giving us the production that you need from a designated player. There's no question that at some point he needs goals, he needs assists. This is just how we measure success. But what I do like about him is that even when he is not producing, he's still able to influence the game through effort, through like silly things like effort. And but he is actually, I think, pretty good at repressing. He is always, he never takes plays off. He makes good runs, and he makes good runs with the ball at his feet. He doesn't always make the right decision at the end, but he is doing things that I think you can appreciate. You don't worry about him giving up on plays. You don't worry about him hanging his head. And he also just strikes me as a thoughtful person. And and that's the thing I'm really looking forward to getting more out of him, is when he's able to, when he's confident enough to like do these interviews in Spanish and or in English, and he's able to sort of articulate these ideas in it himself as opposed to it going through a translator. Yeah,
and today he kind of wanted that to be the focus, right? Yeah. He was literally saying, not just right now, it's always important, but right now especially, we need to think of the collective and not just me. Because we were asking him about Pedro. Hey, right. Pedro, Pedro, that. No, let's worry about the collective. That's what I'm worried about. I'm trying to do whatever it is that I can do. That's his quote. I want to do whatever I can do for what that coach is asking me, for what my teammates are asking me. And that unselfishness and thoughtfulness of the team is important for a young guy.
Yeah.
A lot of young guys are playing for Team Me, FC Niko or FC Pedro or FC whoever. That's what it is. I'm trying to shine up.
Right.
And a lot of the difficulties I feel like he had in a couple of games before the last one where I thought he would look pretty good is that I feel like he had this pressure to just show himself, and he was just too rushed to shoot, to pass, to maybe take an extra touch that he shouldn't have. In this one, not only does he provide you some of the things that we just talked about, but you don't have a guy that can dribble in tight spaces the way he did against Houston. You saw it. There were moments where maybe he should have finished it a little bit better, but that's what you want. And going back to this game, that's where he can elevate the potential of this team, because you don't have another Pedro de la Vega. You don't have a player that's going to be able to break down and have this LAFC team collapse on you to open up other players. And maybe he's worked a lot today on finishing that right foot inside. He also hits it with his left foot. I think he's ambidextrous. He can hit it just as well with his left. He was working on that finishing. Can he be that guy? That would give Seattle the best potential way to win this game. Again, for me, it is an upset. For me, it would be an upset. They're obviously the underdogs. They'd have to play a perfect game, and everything we just talked about has to go perfectly for them to win it. But it's a possibility because of the potential there, right? And that's what we're looking for, is the potential that the Sounders play to the highest expectation that we've had all season, that maybe they haven't been able to reach, but maybe they do it now.
Yeah, and ironically, you go back to the season opener, which is it's interesting that the season started with a road game against LA, and here we are potentially with the last game of the season also being in LA. But the takeaway I had from that game was Pedro de la Vega looked like the best. He was the best Sounders player that day, and he never really was able to build off that because the next game he got hurt, and so I don't think he has ever quite felt the confidence that he felt in that game, but he seemed like a different player, and it's been tough to watch him sort of regress a little bit. And I think that's a lot of that is confidence. A lot of that is him being in his own head and maybe trying to do too much, but it would be fitting if he was sort of able to rediscover that player. And he does seem to have the mentality of being able to get back there. It would be a great story.
100%. And I don't want to focus too much on this part, but this is another reason why I want Raúl in the field. Some of the best moments that I've seen him have at one point for a couple of minutes or whatever it's been Raúl. He wants to play with Raúl. They feel like they find each other well, that they complement each other very well on the field. So seeing that, maybe that's another reason why you would want to run a little bit more in this game. So I'm excited for it. I really am. I want to see how it plays out. It's hard for a team to beat you 5 times in a year. It should be, and you mentioned that, right? It's almost impossible.
It's almost impossible, and it's kind of a statistical fluke almost, because at some point you figure it doesn't go. I mean, you don't play a team 5 times in a year that often, but you definitely, it's tough to do. It doesn't mean it doesn't make the Sounders like the favorites because they're due or anything like that. It's just, it's a very hard accomplishment. And I don't know, I'm taking the trip down there. I'm hoping for the best. Hopefully we'll see a good game at the very least. And it'll be interesting to see how that ends up informing this offseason. I don't think the Sounders are waiting to see what happens in this game to decide on a budget or decide what changes they're going to make, but there will invariably be some impacts based on, what they see in this game. But what I'm hearing, it seems like this offseason promises to be active.
Yep. And
it seems like there are good signs coming from there being a budget to make some additions. But I don't know. It's been an interesting ride for sure.
Look, and when it comes to this game, me personally, I'm going to stay consistent, and that's something that I keep myself very high on, and I hold myself accountable to be consistent. So I still have LAFC winning this game, but I am less confident on that analysis than I was 2 weeks ago. And the reason of that is because of the attitude that I've seen from this team, the character, the desire, the little things about certain players that just feel like they're starting to, if not peak, but they're ascending rather than descending. And that's not something that I saw 2 weeks ago. As much as I've criticized Brian, I got to give him credit because he has put that chin up. He's taking the shots, and he's been able to hold this team together. Whether I believe Christian saying that this is the best, most together team he's ever been on, and I would never believe him if he had his hand to a Bible and could have been processed for perjury, I would still not believe it. But the fact that he and this team has been able to stay together, that alone within itself is something that I give them credit for. And Brian, you got to give him credit for where this team is at. And now, if they pull it off, man, I mean, it'd be a huge success story.
It would be a huge success story. Well, Niko, as always, it's great having you on. We can follow you on Twitter, ElRoloNW. You're not on Blue Sky yet?
I am not.
Gotta get you on Blue Sky.
Jackson asked me about it. I said, man, I just don't know if I have the strength to rebuild. It took me a long time to build.
It is emotionally taxing.
Twitter.
We'll do, if you get on there, this is what we will do our best to get the audience to you as well. We
on board.
Yeah, there we go.
On board. If I get Jeremiah's sponsorship, my campaign to move to Blue, I am ready for it. So yes, I will find it. You can help me out after this and see how I can set that up. And because I've been looking for a new platform, but I hate to leave that following.
It's tough to start from scratch. But the good thing is that we can, whatever. This is not great podcasting content. We'll talk about this offline. But anyway, thank you for coming on here, Niko. Where else you're everywhere these days? You were just on Fox 13. I haven't watched this special yet. You were on the Fox 13 Sounders preview.
I've been doing a couple of things with Aaron Levine. We did an in-studio one. We did one here that has a comical story I'll tell you later. So I've done 3 shows with Q13. The last one was a special where we had Kellen Rowe, Masvita, and it was great. It's always fun to be there, and Sounder Heart is always in the bottom of my name.
There we go.
Pulso Sports, we push it hard.
There we go.
So it's been really good. So you could find me when it comes to local coverage there. Definitely at some point we'll probably do something with Aaron again. I do a Thursday show in English that I always like to commit and tell people to go listen to. 7:30 to about 8:15. Soccer Down Here from Atlanta. He's on Twitch. He's on Twitter. You could follow me on there. Always on Thursdays with Niko. It's a really fun show. And of course, my YouTube channel at Pulso Sports.
Great. Well, thank you again, Niko. I am Jeremiah Oshan, of course. Thank you to our sponsor, Full Pull Wines. Thank you to our producer, Lick It. This is No Sadietes. And we'll catch you next time.
We love you. Let's win another one!